Welcome to Two Taps and Friends. Grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's dive into another episode of Two Taps and Friends.
Welcome back to Two Taps and Friends. Daniel Rosenberg, your host here, and today I got a very special guest, great friend of mine, forever. One of the most renowned in the personal trainer, in the bodybuilding, in the workout field, one of the most renowned names I could have on. Welcome, Michael Ashley.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Danny.
Michael
Thank
Ashley
you.
is the three-time winner of the Arnold Schwarzenegger
One time.
bodybuilding. What was it? One time winner of the Arnold
Yeah.
Classic. Just if you know anything about bodybuilding, Michael Ashley's name will come up at the top of everything. He's owner of Safe Fitness, operator of Safe Fitness, where him and a slew of amazing trainers run the most immaculate gym, personal training. You've been in business for how long?
I've been in business for 15 years.
Yeah, give us a little bit about it, Brad. First of all, welcome on the show. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
us on.
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
on. I'm always appreciative to have you.
Right.
And tell the viewers a little background about you, how you got to where you were doing and what you're doing now, and give us some background.
Yeah, well, I guess if you say, I was in the military first, and once I got out of the military, and I actually liked the military. I did, but I had two challenges. Number one, I was overweight, believe it or not.
Really?
They said, back then they used height and weight chart. And I was overweight by height and weight, by weight, and I didn't really, they gave me what's called a profile. So I went to see a medical doctor, and they said, this guy may be overweight, but we wish we had more soldiers like him, because I did everything. I was actually PT man of the cycle when I went in. So what happened was I decided, well, they didn't really want to kick me out of the army, but they wanted me to go to Germany. And, I was Jamaican born, didn't like the cold at all. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to go. I'm going to get out. And so I got out of the army. And then, of course, when I got out of the army, I started went back to school. And, while I was in school, I got really passionate about nutrition. And then I also, of course, I was into fitness. Actually, I was on a powerlifting team while I was in the military. And so some friends of mine back in New York, they just, hey, man, why don't you come check out our gym? We're opening a gym in New York. I checked it out, and the next thing you know, they had me go in a competition, and I loved it. And, went all the way up the ranks as far as that's concerned. But then, of course, nothing lasts forever. So I had to go back to the reality of, okay, what do I want to do? Now, as a person who has been...
And you were competing, though, at that time. You were competing or not yet?
Yeah, I was competing even when I was in the military.
Right.
Yeah, because I did both powerlifting and bodybuilding. Right. So, and the military loved that part of me, because they like to say, oh, this guy from our platoon did this, that, that. They even gave me half a day to lift with the powerlifting team. So that's how I'm supportive. And now I think they're even more supportive when it comes to, any form of sport. So I'm very supportive. But, as I said, I got out, and of course, what do I want to do? And, I went to a point where after competing, I decided, I want to get into personal training, because it's right along the lines of, getting in shape and the whole 9 yards. And, so I got into that business, and I was living in Arizona at the time. And from there, I moved to Florida. I had an opportunity to get involved in the gym business at that time. And I moved to Florida, and that's when I really, really got into it. And I started out just doing independent contracting in the gym. And then eventually, actually, God bless his soul, I like to put it that way, the founder of Subways, he says, man, you shouldn't be working in anybody's gym. Let's get involved in the gym.
Oh, wow.
And I did that for a number of years, but I was more into the exclusive type, because in the open gym, you have personal training, but then you have Dick, Tom, and Harry, so many people.
Right.
And so I branched into opening a facility that was just for personal training only. And that's pretty much how I ended up in Deerfield, and I'm still there and happy with that.
Yeah. I think you've been doing it for forever.
Yeah.
That's one of the beauties of your gym. Like, no matter what, even with all the trainers that you have, the way you guys time it, it's never too crowded in there. It's like strategic.
Exactly.
And
yeah,
you guys
yeah,
strategically do the time, and it makes a big difference, especially with someone like me, who I've been training. Like, I don't look like I've been training. I'm not. Don't hold it against him. I'm his worst student ever. I don't show up a lot of times. I do show up, but you know what I mean? I always try to restructure.
Yeah.
He really fights me. I understand how important personal
Right,
fitness fitness is, but I tell you all the time, if it wasn't for you, I would never do it because I hate the gym. I hate the weights. I hate the thing, but you know, it's super important. And now that I'm getting up in age, it's
I got to
so
give you
important.
prompts on one key thing, though. Whenever you talk about it, you didn't mention how far you drive.
Oh,
you didn't
yeah.
mention the fact that you got court, you got this, because people always find some reason not to exercise, and you can always find a reason to justify one behavior over another.
Right.
But as much as you may think you're my problem client, what I admire about you is the fact that you drive from Davie, and sometimes you're driving from the courthouse, sometimes you're going back to the courthouse, and, you know, oh, Mike, I got to be in court this time, that time. So I give you credit for that, because there are a lot of people who find reasons not to do it at all. So
Well, I don't want to deal with you. I don't want to get in trouble. You know what I mean? I know I'm getting in trouble with Mike if I don't do what I got to do. But listen,
Right,
you
right.
saved my life. You know, honestly, I don't know. Be honest with you. You save a lot of people's lives. Like,
Thank
if you
you.
don't do
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you do, people don't understand. You know, when you're not keeping fitness up and you're getting older, it's just a ticking, a ticking time bomb, right? A lot of these people.
It's a very important part of life, and even more so longevity. Because right now, sometimes we get away when we're a lot younger, but you're not going to get away as you get older. And so what happens is it's important to exercise and eat properly. It's part of body maintenance. I like to look at it as, the same way we're concerned about showers, brushing our teeth, or doing all the various things, comb our hair, bodily function is deeper than that. And so, exercise is very, very important.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, I was always playing sports when I was younger, right? So I didn't really have to think about it. But then when you get older and you're not able to really play the sport the same way that you did when you were younger because your body, your body starts to break down. You know what I mean? So you've been a really important. People need to do it more, and everybody fights you on it.
Right.
And I always think it's so funny, like during the New Year's resolutions, you always do, like, we're in a networking group together, and you always get up
Exactly.
and tell the people, like, yeah, it's January, I'm going to be super extra busy now.
Right.
And some of these guys are going to drop off in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely, yeah.
People want to do it, but the work, you got to put in the work,
Yeah. Well, they have the saying, age is wasted on the young. So when everything is feeling good and functioning well, we don't get concerned about it. But, you hit 25, that cycle starts to change right then and there. And, the reality starts to check. You don't get away with as much as you used to. And all of a sudden, maybe I have to invest in this whole exercise thing, put some time and things of that nature. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's get into some of the gritty. I kind of wanted to talk about some topics that I think that viewers would be interested in, especially, and even viewers that don't work out or do all that kind of stuff, right? Because I think it's definitely harder for some people than others, right? We talked about genetic predisposition was a term that you've always brought up to me. Like, you find that some people, everybody has that friend, that skinny friend that eats and eats and eats and eats and eats and doesn't gain weight, and then some of us look at a piece of pizza and gain 10 pounds, right?
But even before we go there, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Because you just said something that's very important to address.
Sure.
Some people
I love it when I do
exercise,
that, so
some
go
people
ahead.
exercise, and some people don't.
Right.
There is not a person on this earth, unless you have some sort of extreme medical condition that causes you not to exercise. There's no such person. Everyone should be exercising in some shape, form, whatever it may be. It's not like we have options. This is part of body maintenance. And so if we feel like we're concerned about having quality of life, in this day and age, exercise is a significant part of it. So that's all I wanted to mention.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree. And just being around people that I love that are elderly or, that went through a sickness. And, when the body gives out, no matter how strong the mind is,
That's right.
The body gives out. And it's heartbreaking to watch when you watch someone that you care about that be in that position. Because their muscle tone, if their muscle tone was better, or they took care of themselves, or their nutrition was better, you knew that they would have more of a chance to fight whatever sickness.
Yeah.
But like I was saying, the genetic predisposition thing. So I get in a fight with my wife all the time, right? and she's going to listen to this and get upset with me probably, but she works very hard at fitness.
Absolutely,
And everybody does. It doesn't take away, but would you agree that it's harder for some people as far as for gaining muscle and gaining weight? Some people gain weight easier. Can you talk about that and what that's about? And obviously there's other aspects to it, but what is your thought on that?
Well, there is no universal thing wherein everyone is on an equal playing field.
Right.
We're on an equal playing field in terms of the ability to do something, but in terms of the response, it's not necessarily universal across the board. One of the things we can look at is just body types for starters. You have the body type, they call it like an ectomorph.
Okay.
And it's that leaner, slim person.
Right.
And
the guy that eats 10 pieces of pizza and doesn't gain weight.
and he gets away with murder sometimes.
Right.
You can look at it that way. But it's a predisposition where genetically that person is just on the leaner side. And then you have the extreme on the other end, they call them the endomorph. This person is a more robust, round, full person that carries body fat a lot easier than they can have that experience from a lifestyle wherein that ectomorph would be more abusive and get away with it. The endomorph doesn't get that same experience. And then you have this individual in the middle of the road, so they're not extreme right or left. They call them the mesomorph. And that mesomorph, is a little bit on the leaner side, but not to the extreme of the ectomorph. And this person has in some ways, you'd say the best of both worlds. They can put muscle on, they can carry fat, they can lose it, they can respond differently. And then there have some, it's not like universally big threes, there are some endo, meso, some ectom, so
Right, like
it's a variety. But yes, not everybody respond the same way. And even to exercises, you have some people, they exercise and they don't get the same response. They get something, but not necessarily the same as others. Yeah, so there are some predispositions there that do affect the outcome of the effort that you put into it.
But you do obviously change how you train a person based on that, right?
Well, yes. I think when it comes to the training, it's goal dependent. Regardless of what the person looks like, or if the person because an ectomorph can come and say, hey, I want to put on more muscle. And, you're going to train them in a manner where it's more conducive to it. And, of course, dietary habits play a much more significant role as far as putting on muscle than just training itself. So in that case, that individual, they're going to not necessarily respond the same way like a mesomorph, regardless of how much effort and time you put in there. So sometimes you look, even like we talk about we mentioned bodybuilding, and we look into physique sports. I mean, there's some guys that try very hard, and they could invest, and they don't necessarily ever make it to the Mr. Olympia or even to the national level.
Right.
And they're dedicated and they work hard. So there is something to be said for that, but it doesn't mean you don't give the most effort you can to get the most out of it.
Right, because the mindset, I mean, we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about, topics earlier. The mindset is, you think, more important than all of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you made a very good point, and I could give you an example.
Sure.
I loved track and field. If you think bodybuilding, everybody said, man, this guy loved bodybuilding from when I was a kid. Because, I actually competed in Teenage Mr. America. That was my first competition. But my point in high school, I loved track and field. And I was one of these dedicated individuals. My track coach was very influential. I would run all summer. I would train. And when the season started, some of my friends, they didn't even train over the summer.
Right.
And the moment we get into the season, they would kick my butt, regardless of how hard I worked. And what happened is, I responded, but I didn't respond as well as they did. And at the same time, we had gym class. And I saw myself respond to resistance training, strength training, in a manner that was completely different. And that's where I made the choice that track and field is not for me. And then, of course, it manifests itself when I was in the military. because my body just responded. People are like, dude, what are you doing?
Right.
Yeah, I'm doing exactly the same thing you do. I just get a better response. But the vice versa in terms of, running track and field. Yeah.
I mean, I think people are, with sports, it's more evident too. Like, even when I was like
Oh, yeah.
coaching, I would coach my kids, like Jacob in sports. On the U7 soccer team,
Right.
I could literally spot 2 players that I knew were going to play soccer for the rest of their life.
Right.
Same in baseball.
Yeah,
Same
exactly.
in lacrosse. Same in any basketball, right?
Yeah,
we were all. There's a comedian who does a joke, like we all thought we were great players till the 16, 15, 14, 13-year-old comes and dunks on us, right? We're like, all right, well, maybe I'll just play good defense, right? Like,
Right.
But like, so there is the predisposition and
agree.
everything. So I think some people obviously are going to respond to
Right.
lifting better, are going to gain weight easier, and like,
Uh-huh.
so it is a gene in your experience. Like some people are just in the family, they have it where they're able to gain weight more.
Well, when we get at the extreme levels now, if we want to be totally critical,
Right.
But if we then just say everyone is doing what's necessary, they're going to get results. It's just that it's not going to be at the same rate as some of their counterparts. So they have to accept that fact. You were talking about yourself and your wife. She responds better than you. Doesn't mean you get a get out of jail card. You just got to do what you got to do with what you have.
Well, I have to eat better too. That's the problem.
Absolutely.
Is like with me, like I feel like I have more challenge with the food than she does. Not like that I like to eat more, but and I'm not saying she doesn't, and she works very hard.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's easier for me, I feel like, to gain weight. I have the propensity to get really, I don't know, huge, but like bigger than I think that she does. But I think that if everybody just threw their guard down, people could all gain weight,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But I think it makes a difference. You know what I mean?
It does. It does. So you then have to say to yourself, well, I can't do what my wife can do. I have to do what
I'll
works
never
for
say that. That's never gonna happen. Let's move on that. That's never gonna happen. I have to work harder.
In terms of this particular
Right.
scenario, yeah, I know you are. But I'm saying you're going to have to say, hey, we both want a certain outcome, but now I'm going to have to go about it differently.
Yeah. And I think what's harder when everybody gets older, they're all shocked because everything gets harder. Like losing weight gets harder, building muscle gets harder, and it kind of rolls into our next topic, muscle. I have the building muscle versus weight loss. And a lot of times you see people that I'll see people that are overweight, right? Or struggling with their weight. And they're like, well, I'm hitting the gym 3 times a day or 4 times a day. And that's great, right? But you got to do both, right? You want to talk about that a little bit?
You mean the nutrition part?
Nutrition, talk about like how what's your opinion about that? When you see someone that's just hitting the gym, but you see that they're 30, 40 pounds overweight.
Well, I will give you an example. Even of they were looking at kids as a whole, and you have this one kid that's really overweight, and sometimes people are not necessarily nicest about that individual.
Oh my God,
but it's
kids are
not
brutal.
just fat. It's not just fat. There's some muscle there too. So it so happened this kid, even though he was overweight, he could move some serious load compared to his other friends in class. So they were like showing him respect based on that. But yes, he was overweight. So it's not like someone just have excess body fat and only fat. Because even when an overweight person, just to carry that extra load around, actually help to stimulate the growth of lean body mass. Because if you're stepping up some stairs and this other person is like 300 pounds, when that person make that step, it's significantly different than a much lighter person. So yeah, what has to happen in terms of those two individuals, the person that's morbidly obese, or we would call that, and when the person's extremely overweight, that person has to be extremely conscientious about the nutrition. At the same time, that person that is maybe genetically or just have that response where they don't carry that much, they also have to be conscientious about the nutrition. But the level of it is just going to be different between both. So a deficit has to be created, and it has to be more aggressive on that person that's extremely overweight.
Right.
So the whole focus still remains, hey, I want to get in shape, I want to function, look and feel better, but that person that's extremely overweight has to be even more conscientious about their dietary habits.
I think everybody's idea of what in shape is different too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all defined. Well, we have some general.
Right. When you go to a doctor, they tell you, hey, they look at your height, they look at your weight, they're like, you're overweight, you're not in shape.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of that.
I figured you would
Respectfully,
be.
I will say height and weight charts doesn't really, and even in the military, they were extreme with it before, and now they're not doing that in the same manner. But yes, we have evolved as a society, so body composition is really what really tells. And like we say, a male, like if you're like say 14% body fat, that's actually not a bad body fat for just a general person.
Right.
But you get to the extreme, like the physiques and all those fitness. Those are a little bit on the extreme side, and it doesn't truly define health. So that's depending on the individual and what their goals are. If someone say they want to eat, like for example, when I competed on stage, that's not something I would recommend for anyone to have and walk around with. And not even the competitors do that. When you see a person is trying to stay extremely lean, it's really not necessarily in their best interest when they get really, really lean. So
the definition you're meaning, like.
yeah.
Right.
Well, you can be defined, but I will tell you, at the elite level, competitors are like 5% and even less in some cases. Now, you don't really need to walk around. A woman, she can be at like a 20% body fat, and that's really good for a female. And like I said, 14 for a male. Now, you get down to 10, it's still good, but you start getting down to single digits and even lower, getting closer to, like I just mentioned, 5%. Not even the competitors walk around like that. Yeah.
So when somebody comes to you, what is your first assessment? How do you assess a new patient? When they come in,
Yeah.
what is your assessment on how you're going to treat this person? What is the first thing
Yeah.
you ask?
Well, the first thing is to sit down with that individual and ask them what's their goal. Okay, you came in here. I'm sure you have some motivation. It's not. Some people come and say, my doctor said I need to start exercising. Some people say, when I was in college, I used to play football, and I was in great shape, and that has passed. So I want to get in better shape. And of course, with everyone, we have to do a medical history. The bare minimum is medical history and then blood pressure, because what happens is when you start exercising, you have the two numbers, the top one is systolic and the bottom one diastolic, just to kind of generalize it.
Yeah.
Both of them actually, when you're doing strength training, they both elevate. So let's say we have a male over 40, and in some of those cases, you even need a physician's release for them to start getting an exercise program. But they walk into the gym and we do that assessment. The blood pressure is very important because a stroke can occur because we know nothing about this person. And so that's the bare minimum we would do with them. But we do more extensive. We do body composition, we look at resting pulse, and we have all these various ranges. So we gather all this information and we explain it to them. And then, what would you like to do? Yeah. And the person says, well, really, I want to lose some weight. Some people, I want to put on muscle. Depending on where their age is, the guys that still want to look, they're trying to, in early 40s, and they want to do that. And so we'd more or less give them an overview of basically what it takes to achieve that. Resistance training, I would say the bare minimum that someone should be exercising as far as strength training, it would be twice a week. You can do what we call full body twice a week, and that would be like the bare minimum. 3 times a week is even more ideal. So that part, they got to do some cardiorespiratory fitness or cardio, and we can get very extensive in our facility. We do what's called a submax stress test, and it finds out the maximum amount of oxygen you utilize per minute, and it's called the VO2 max. So we don't necessarily take the person to a max, but we take them to a submax, and we can calculate the max. Now that kind of tells us how fit they are. Like myself, at 65, I'm in the 40s right now, and that's pretty respectable. And they say like a 35-year-old male, if they're at 35, that's okay. So once we defined it, and we explain it to them, then we design a program around it. Now, we're not dietitians, and I love to always make that disclaimer. Myself, I'm certified in weight management. I understand basic nutrition, but if a person wants to come in, I would always say, hey, we can refer you to a dietitian. Now, in our environment, one of the things we do, we make people aware, and we use different apps and just say, document your dietary intake. And when they document their dietary intake and get a concept of what they're eating, sometimes people are like, wow, I didn't even know I ate as much, or in some cases, I eat that little. And so we can just make them aware and just give them general information, and they make overnight changes just by documenting, because you're eating throughout the day. You don't really have a concept of what it is.
I have a concept.
And I'm not saying generalizing
I'm
it.
joking.
Yeah. But when a person, oh man, I didn't know I was eating that much. And then based on your weight, somewhere, your energy should be somewhere around here. We give them some kind of general information. And sometimes people pull in the rein just from that, along with exercise, and pretty much they say significant difference.
I think,
So,
not to interrupt, but I think what was interesting about what you were saying about the systolic and I don't want to use the wrong
yeah,
technical term, right?
diastolic.
The heart
yeah,
rates.
Yeah.
And because I see people that train with, the, what do they call the CrossFit and all that, where, and I'm not knocking anything, right? But I think when you're unmonitored and that kind of reading isn't done. Remember, like we just went through seeing all these young athletes drop.
Right.
And, and it had to do with the heart rates, how quick the heart rate drops
Recovery.
down, right?
Right.
And you want to talk about that a little bit so people have an understanding how important that is to know before you just go and start killing yourself in the gym?
Well, I'll just sum it up that.
Right, we're not doctors. There's a disclaimer, right?
Yeah.
But based on your
somewhere if I see a person exceed 135/85 in terms of systolic and diastolic,
right?
We call our suspectitions as trainers, so we really can't diagnose.
Okay.
So if I see a person, and they're hypertensive, let's say the person is like over 140, and the diastolic is over 90, right off the back, that's a flag. As a trainer, I should not have that person do any form of exercise.
So there's a medical condition, they need to seek a doctor.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, the way I usually put it to them, I say exactly what I just said to you. I am a suspectician. I suspect that your blood pressure is high. Now you have to get that verification by actually seeing your physician.
Right.
And I've had a circumstance, and I won't get off on much of a tangent, but I had a circumstance where this one gentleman, he got really upset. He says, I used to play football, I used to this, I used to that, but his blood pressure was high. And I said, I really can't train you. And it doesn't matter how much you're going to pay me, because I'm setting myself up for what I don't know.
Right.
And so he went to his physician, and his physician says, yes, your blood pressure is high. And he ended up putting him on medication and say, that same place that told you that, that's the place you need to go. Because what happens is, one thing that can happen is they could have a stroke. And, stroke can be from one extreme to the next.
Right.
And so you're actually looking out for them by saying, hey, your blood pressure is high, and as a result, I'm going to have you see a physician. Now, we're talking about, in general, even if the person has good blood pressure and everything, when we start them on an exercise program, we can't get aggressive with them. So under no circumstance, that person has to gradually adapt to the exercise regimen, and we progress slowly. So regardless, I think even a person that's not necessarily in their 40s, a young individual in college or in high school, they do physicals. And if someone is actually partaking in a sport, any one of those sports without a physical, that's really a flag, because really adverse things can happen.
And age is a factor, right? I always joke I always joke when I see I put a post up sometime. I cut some slack for it. Like I wrote that if you're under the age of 30, I am not impressed with your fitness, right? And that's a cold statement. But listen, when we're in our 20s, like
Yeah.
you still people work out, they work hard on their fitness, but it's a little bit easier. I said if you're over 40 and you're posting these pictures, I'm much more impressed.
Right. Mhm.
I mean, it's a big difference.
Yeah, it does make a difference.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. And so what is your take on like people hear testosterone and supplements, and let's talk about testosterone for people over a certain age. What is your opinion on testosterone replacement or
Hormone replacement?
hormone replacement? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it has its place, but I don't think some of the people that do hormone replacement are necessarily doing it for medical reasons. They're trying to chase the youth. But then there are some people, myself being one of them, that even in my 60s, I have really high testosterone level. So, yeah, you do your blood work and you find out, well, one of the indicators, sometimes people, they get in their 30s and 40s and they start to feel really lethargic and sluggish. They exercise, they're not seeing a good, and there could be other variables. One of the first thing you do is change the way you eat. And I tell you, one of the best thing that can be like a drug is sleep. If a person is not getting enough sleep, it can really make a mess of their blood profile. So we have to look at all those variables before we even start talking about testosterone. Now, let's say a person changed the way they eat, they're exercising and they're eating properly, and they still have pretty low numbers. There are doctors that will say, this might be an approach that can make a difference, and it will make a difference in their lives. So from that standpoint, I don't have a problem with it. Of course, I'm not suggesting it or recommending that people should go ahead and get involved with hormone replacement, because there are some doctors that said they're not necessarily up to date with all the information, but they don't feel comfortable with it, and they'll say, hey, you don't really need it, and go your journey that route.
Right, and the hormone replacement has to do a lot, as far as for people that are using it to work out or get bigger. If you could talk to the layman about what the effects are, the recovery is quicker, right?
Well, you recover better. As far as strength training, you're gonna see a response at a much more aggressive rate than without. And some people even sleep better. So there's a number of, and I can't make, I won't make a statement saying this is going to happen with this individual or that individual. But there are doctors who will say, let's give it a try and see how you respond to it. And if it makes a difference, it might be something you should do. And again, they might say, hey, if it's not going to make a difference, or if it doesn't make a difference, I wouldn't necessarily, approach it that way. Now, when you talk about sports, like, for example, bodybuilding, those are extremists, and their purpose is totally different. We're talking about for the general layperson, and it varies, but I've heard of some people with extremely low levels that are abnormal. And
that gets dangerous, right?
And those are the individuals that, someone that's is trained in doing hormone replacement, that would be a person to see. Because not all doctors are necessarily trained in that arena.
Right. And what do you find for each person? Do you think it's different for the quickest or the best way to build muscle? Just generally, is it per person you see it, or what do you find as far as like reps maybe, or weight, or what do you like to advise people when they want to build muscle? We'll talk about losing weight in a minute, but
one of the things to look at. We look at it in a manner of resistance training. You're trying to overcome a load, right? And whether it's for 10 repetitions, now studies are saying from 5 reps to 50 reps. Before, everybody was this 8 and 12, and there's so much research going on now. Even at 50 repetitions, you can actually put muscle on. Unfortunately, the person is not necessarily they don't have a real good concept of excellent form when you're taking it to, when you're maximizing muscle fatigue in a workout. So if you're about 15, 20 reps, depending on the movement too, because some of the smaller groups you can go high repetitions, But imagine like squatting for 30 reps. I had a professor at FAU that did that consistently for an extreme period of time.
Wow.
But it was doing a study, but it's not a play date. So the general population probably don't even want to do that, and they don't have to. But the whole idea is progressive overload, meaning you load the system with a certain amount of rep within a certain range, and as your body wants to overcome that load, it's going to respond by getting stronger. And then you do it again, and you gradually
Up the load.
up the load. And as long as you're eating properly and resting and doing all those other important aspects of it, the muscle is going to grow. And this thing that some people say, oh man, when you get over 60, you can't put muscle on. It's a lot slower, but even at that age, you can still put muscle on. The whole idea is to develop a program or have a program developed for the individual that covers the entire body. And, whether the person does it, like I said, the bare minimum twice per week, because there's very efficient ways to train. Or they do it 3 times per week, or, some people do it more. It's not necessarily, the key thing is not to overdo it to a point where it has a negative impact on the body. But they will put on muscle. Now, if they keep doing all of that and they're not eating properly, they're not going to see the response because the fuel is not there.
So the eating does have to do, you can't just be eating bad stuff. And the body can't, the shortness is the body can't do what it does if it's not fueled correctly.
Okay, I'm going to say something to you that it might surprise you. You can actually put on muscle and everything using junk food just like you will using healthy food.
Really?
Here's the problem.
I'm going to use this in the next training session.
No. I'm not. I want to make a point about that, I want to make a point and make the distinction because oftentimes we have these individuals that they get on these soapboxes and they're just like, if you don't eat just so perfect, you're not going to see the results. And it's very unrealistic for a lot of people. And as a result, my norm and your norm might be totally different. And some people get discouraged, and of course, they don't want to do it. Now, I wanted to give you a scenario where I said, I can put a person on a program, and they eat junk food, and they will still lose weight and all of that. But we have to look at the junk food is so concentrated that the quantity of food they're going to get is so much less. So when you eat that high fiber food, when you eat that healthier choice, whether it's brown rice, baked potato in terms of carbohydrates, chicken or fish in terms of protein, broccoli, cauliflower, wide variety of vegetables, and then also in terms of fruits, strawberries, blueberries, that person now has this robust quantity of food because it's not as concentrated in terms of the calories. And of course, they're going to see a much better response from it. The reason why I made that point is it's not recommended, but if the key thing is to create a deficit. So if you're creating a deficit, you're going to lose weight.
Explain that a little bit more, because I was going to ask you about that.
So let's say, for example, myself, let's say I'm ingesting about 3,000 calories per day, all righty? And
3 calories across the board, whether it's cheese fries or chicken, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
regardless.
All right, so 3,000.
And I create a deficit. Let's say I take it down to 2,500.
Okay.
I am going to lose weight. Are the health benefits the same as the healthier choice of food? No, but it's still a deficit. So you are going to lose weight. And that's the thing. That's the first thing. It's not necessarily as recommended, but people think, oh, you have to be on this extreme this way or that way in order to get it. If you have what we call a surplus, I don't even care if it's healthy food, you're going to gain weight. And yeah, I could eat as healthy as ever, and if I'm packing in too much, I can actually even get fat because of the fact that I'm eating so much and my body doesn't really need or require that many calories. So where do we store the excess fat? We store it in terms of our fat cells. And, we got about 25 to 35 billion fat cells and in a human body, just in a general sense. And what happens is those cells, they call it hypertrophy. They can facilitate quite a bit. That's why you see, it's not like the morbid obese person all of a sudden gain these excess number of fat cells. It's just that the fat cells they have just start to grow. and to facilitate those excess, storage. The thing about it is, and there are 2 times in our lives when they actually increase in number during the adolescent years for kids. And I wanted to point that out because it's really important. Because sometimes people use food to more or less satisfy young kids. Like, they give them junk food, they sit in the corner. So an overweight child is going to struggle as an overweight adult. So what happens is, because during the adolescent years, those cells not do they only grow, but they also increase in numbers. And I think another time is during pregnancy. So this thing where when women get pregnant, I'm pregnant, so I can eat whatever I want. I can eat all of this. I'm trying to facilitate the nutrients for the baby. That is another time, and that's why sometimes after the child, they have this struggle to lose weight because the cells can also increase in terms of number. So that's one of the key things to look at. But back to what we were saying is the deficit has to be created, and that's how you lose weight. Now, when it comes to, I also want to consume foods that are more nutritious for the body, that's where, my fruits, my vegetables, my grains, my protein, the leaner protein, and I got to get some dairy in those. Those cover the food groups, and pretty much you have to be more conscientious.
You're just getting more bang for your buck.
Absolutely.
So that's why you always hate these crash fad diets, right? Which makes sense because talk about it, because it's literally, it seems like, okay, you're just, don't eat any of this and you'll lose weight. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you don't eat any of that, you lose weight. Mm-hmm. But the reality of someone going through the rest of their life without eating that ever again and not understanding deficit, they're going to be back, right? Go ahead,
absolutely.
Speak to that. You know what I mean?
Well, the body likes where it is at certain points in your journey. So my body likes me at this particular weight, whatever it is at that point in time. Right. And all of a sudden, I drastically create this extreme deficit. You know what the body is? I want to get back to where I was. That's basically what it's looking at. And the other thing is, when they're extreme, we don't just lose fat. Muscle is a more metabolically active tissue. Right. And I talk to people, I say muscle is like ice. That temperature gets too high, that muscle is going to melt. And from the analogy of ice. And now when we speak in terms of aggressive deficits, when a person do it in a very aggressive manner, not only do they lose fat, they also lose muscle. But they don't gain the muscle back as fast as they gain the fat. So what happens is you have this vicious cycle. Okay, they go on the extreme diet, they lose weight. And then they go back to how they were eating, and they gain weight back. But the muscle did not come back at the same rate. And then they do it again, and then they do it again. So not only do they sometimes develop eating disorders, they find that it becomes harder to maintain the weight because that lean body mass is not there anymore. Right. And there's some there, but it's not at the level. So when you're creating deficits, they cannot be extreme. And that's why quick fix diets don't work because of this vicious cycle. And the first thing you lose is you lose a lot of water. Remember, the muscle is somewhere 65-70% water anyway. So you go on some of these extreme diet and I lost 10 pounds. And really. So it's better to, we always say 0.5 to 1% of your weight if you were to say, I'm setting a goal on a weekly basis, is going to be a little bit more manageable, and it's not a lot of weight. And so what happens is sometimes people get discouraged because their expectations are very unrealistic. Yeah,
I think that's a good place to kind of stop. We were talking about weight loss, so the key is obviously, like you said, the key is to get as much bang for your buck as you can, and if you're going to slow and create that deficit, do it slowly so the body can adapt and not crave.
Absolutely.
Food back again.
If a person put 250 calorie deficit, of course, the larger the person, the greater range in terms of what that deficit. That's why percentage is a good way to look at it. But if you're creating a deficit of either 3,500 calories. That would be for like extremely heavy person if they're saying, drop my daily calories by 500 calories a day. But if you're doing it like 250, that's gonna be a little bit more manageable. And part of it can even not be that extreme. Some people can increase activity and also create a deficit, and that can work out to be more favorable and even more manageable too. Right. And that's where dietitians come into play, because they sit, and even though I'm a trainer certified in weight management and all of that, I always like to say, a dietitian is going to be golden for an individual who wants to really lose weight, because they're going to educate them on better food choices. And as long as it's not one of those that is on this extreme tangent, they usually can bring that person in and help them create the deficit that will allow them to lose the weight they want.
Well, you're stuck with me, buddy, forever. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Definitely
it's
my
always
pleasure.
A pleasure to have
yes,
you.
Yes,
my brother.
Yes.
Always great day. Listen, go check out Mike Ashley. He's accessible, satefitness.com. They're on Instagram. They're everywhere. Amazing trainer, amazing group with him. You get to meet him in person, in the flesh. He'll berate you on your diet if you come joking. No, but Mike, thank you so much.
Oh,
thank
definitely
you
a pleasure.
Can't wait to have you back on and talk about some more issues.
Yes, most definitely.
But thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you to all the viewers. Thank you for watching Two Taps and Friends. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I'm being told I have to ask you this every time. We're on YouTube, YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Instagram. We're everywhere. Check us out. Thank you all. Love you all. Goodbye. Cut.